My brother showed off his Rolex and called me broke. I'm a watchmaker. I replied, it's counterfeit. Okay, gather round, because what I'm about to tell you, it's one of those stories you just can't make up. Can you imagine looking your own brother in the eye, knowing he just asked you to validate a lie? What if that lie wasn't just about a stupid fake watch, but about the very legacy of your father, shattered into pieces right before your eyes? Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So, my brother Derek, he's always been a bit much. The kind of guy who needs everyone to know he's crushing it. Not subtly, you know? More like, let me park my BMW sideways so it takes up 2 spots at Mom's house kind of way. He's 36, a sales director at some mid-tier software company. Honestly, it's a decent gig. But to hear Derek tell it, he's basically running the whole damn operation. Me? I'm Connor, 32. I work at a place called Hard Row & Sons, a specialty watch shop. We restore, appraise, and sell high-end timepieces. Think vintage Omegas, Patek Philippe's, Rolex Submariners from the 60s that are worth more than most people's cars. I've been doing this for almost 8 years, and I'm good. Really good. But here's the thing about my family. They just don't get it. My mom, Pamela, tells her friends I fix clocks. Derek once asked if I was still doing that little jewelry thing at Christmas. My dad was the only one who truly understood. He was a carpenter, worked with his hands his whole life, and he respected craftsmanship in any form. He passed 3 years ago, and honestly, family gatherings haven't been the same since. Which brings me to last month, our annual family reunion at Mom's lake house. I almost didn't go. My girlfriend, Lily, could tell I was dreading it. She's met Derek twice, and that was enough for her to form a complete picture. But she also knows I go for Mom and for my Uncle Ray, Dad's brother, a retired jeweler. Ray's one of the few people I can actually talk to in that family. We drove up Friday afternoon, pulled into gravel driveway, and yep, there it was. Derek's BMW, parked sideways. Some things never change. We walked in, and Mom hugged me like she hadn't seen me in years. Then she pulled back, looked at my flannel shirt and jeans, and said, Honey, you couldn't have dressed up a little? I'd been there for, 11 seconds? Derek was holding court in the living room, an audience of aunts and cousins who see him once a year and don't know any better. He was gesturing wildly with his left hand, and immediately I noticed it. On his wrist was a very shiny, very gold watch. Connor! He spotted me and crossed the room, arms wide. Big hug, lots of backslapping. Then he pulled back and held his wrist up between us. Notice anything new? Nice watch, I said. Nice, bro. This, he puffed out his chest, is a Rolex Submariner. Do you know what one of these costs? I have some idea, I replied. He laughed like I'd made a joke. Right, I forgot. You're the clock guy. He looked down at my wrist. I was wearing my trusty black Casio F91W. $40. Most reliable watch ever made, incidentally. But that's a different conversation. Still rocking the Casio, huh? He shook his head with this pitying little smile. You know, there's nothing wrong with treating yourself, Connor. You don't have to live like a monk. Megan, his wife, appeared behind him. She's one of those people who's always holding her phone like she's about to capture a moment, which she usually is. Oh my gosh, is that the same watch from last year? She pointed at my Casio. That is so funny. Derek, show him yours again. Derek rotated his wrist slowly, like he was in a commercial. 42 millimeter, ceramic bezel, black dial. This right here is a statement piece. I just smiled and said something neutral like, it looks great on you, which, for the record, was a completely neutral statement. Here's what I didn't say. I didn't say that I'd already clocked 3 things in the first 2 seconds. The weight looked wrong. The crown guard were slightly off, and the lume on the hour markers had that specific greenish tint you only see on replicas that use cheap Superluminova knockoffs. I handle submariners almost every week. I know what they look like the way a mechanic knows the sound of a healthy engine, but I kept my mouth shut. It was a family reunion, and picking a fight with Derek about his watch wasn't going to make my weekend any better. Dinner was fine. Derek told everyone about his incredible year in sales. Megan showed my cousin photos of their kitchen renovation. Mom asked me twice if I was still happy at the shop, which is her version of asking when I'm going to get a real job. Lily squeezed my knee under the table the second time she asked. After dinner, I was sitting on the porch with Uncle Ray. He's 71, quiet, smokes a pipe when Pamela isn't watching. He'd been mostly silent during Derek's performance all evening. "Your brother's really something," Ray said, not admiringly. "He's consistent, I'll give him that." I replied. Ray puffed on his pipe and looked out at the lake. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "I asked him about your dad's watches last month." I turned. "What do you mean? Dad's collection?" "Gene's collection, the one he built over 35 years. I asked Derek how it was doing, if they were stored properly, if the humidity was controlled. You know your dad had some nice pieces in there." "I know," I said, not forming. What did Derek say? Ray took a long pull on his pipe. He got real antsy. Said they were in a safe deposit box, appreciating in value. Told me not to worry about it. Changed the subject real fast. "My dad's watch collection. When he died, his will said it was to be split equally between Derek and me. Derek had volunteered to handle the logistics, since I was dealing with the worst of the grief at the time. He told me the watches were secured, and we'd figure out the details when the time was right. That was 3 years ago. I'd asked about it maybe twice since then, and both times Derek gave me some vague answer about storage and timing and not rushing into selling anything. I never pushed it. I should have. Did something seem off to you?" I asked Ray. He tapped his pipe against the railing. "I've known your brother his whole life, Connor. Something always seems off with Derek. But yeah, this felt different." I sat with that for a while. Then I went inside to help clean up. As I walked through the living room, Derek was showing his watch to my cousin Marcus, explaining the investment value of luxury timepieces. I caught a glimpse of the dial in the lamplight. The date window magnification was wrong. On a real submariner, the Cyclops lens magnifies the date 2.5 times. On this one, it was barely noticeable. I grabbed a dish towel and headed to the kitchen without saying a word. But something was churning in my mind, and it wasn't just the watch. That night, lying in the guest room with Lily already asleep beside me, I pulled out my phone and searched through my photos. I found what I was looking for, a picture I'd taken 2 years ago of my dad's handwritten inventory list. He'd cataloged every watch he owned in a little leather notebook, and I'd photographed the pages before Derek took possession of everything. I zoomed in on the list. 14 watches, a 1967 Omega Seamaster, a Tudor Black Bay, a couple of Seikos, and 2 that I'd never had the chance to examine in person because Derek had moved everything before I could. I stared at that list for a long time. Then I put my phone down and looked at the ceiling, because a very uncomfortable question was forming in my head, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Derek already performing. He was making omelets and narrating the process like he was hosting a cooking show. Megan was filming him on her phone. My mom watched from the kitchen table with this proud expression that only ever points in his direction. "Connor." Derek waved the spatula at me. "Grab a plate. I'm making my signature 3-cheese omelet. Learned it from a private chef in Napa." He really did. Megan confirmed without looking up from her phone. At this incredible resort we stayed at, it was like $900 a night. Lily gave me a look from across the kitchen that said everything without saying anything. I ate the omelet. It was fine. It was eggs and cheese. After breakfast, Derek was out on the deck, doing his thing again, lounging in a chair, legs crossed, wrist angled so the sunlight caught the watch face. A few of my cousins were around. He was on his second favorite topic after himself. Things he owned. The thing about a real luxury timepiece, Derek was saying, leaning forward like he was sharing insider knowledge, is that it's not just a watch. It's a statement about where you are in life. It says, "I've arrived." He glanced at me. "No offense, Connor. The Casio thing is kind of your brand at this point." My cousin Nicole laughed. "Not mean exactly, just going along with it." "None taken," I said. "Seriously, though, you work at a watch store, right? You must appreciate this." He thrust his wrist toward me. "Tell me that's not beautiful. Here's the moment. I could have let it go, I'd been letting it go for 2 days. But something about the way he said watch store, like I was selling Timex at mall kiosks, combined with Uncle Ray's comments from the night before, combined with a growing pit in my stomach about Dad's collection, all of it just sort of crystallized. I took his wrist, gently turned it slightly so I could see the caseback angle. I looked at the bezel, the dial, the hands, the crown. Took about 4 seconds. "It's fake," I said. The deck went quiet. Derek laughed. That automatic, defensive laugh people do when they're not sure if they just got hit. "What?" "The watch. It's a replica. A pretty good one, honestly. Probably cost maybe $250. But it's not a Rolex." "Connor, what are you talking about?" His face was doing something complicated. Still smiling, but the smile was fighting with something underneath. The magnification on the Cyclops is wrong. It should be 2.5 times. Yours is barely 1.5. The lume has that green cast that only shows up on aftermarket dials. And the weight is off. A real submariner in gold weighs about 196 grams. This feels like maybe 140. That's because the case is gold-plated stainless steel, not solid gold. I wasn't being cruel about it. I said it the way I'd say it to a customer who brought something in for appraisal. Factual, calm, clinical. Derek pulled his wrist back. "You don't know what you're talking about. I appraise these for a living, Derek. I've handled probably 200 submariners in the last 5 years. Well, maybe your little shop doesn't see the newer models. This is supposed to be a reference, 116618LN. That model's been around since 2010. I've seen dozens of them." Megan stood up. "Derek bought that at a jeweler, a real jeweler. It came with papers and everything. Papers are the easiest thing to fake." I said, "Easier than the watch, actually." Derek was on his feet now. The friendly big brother mask was completely gone. "You know what your problem is, Connor? You've always been jealous. Always. I do well. I buy nice things. And you can't handle it because you're stuck in some back room squinting at old watches for $12 an hour. I make a lot more than $12 an hour," I countered, almost instinctively. "Whatever, man. This is a real Rolex. And I'm not going to stand here and let my little brother embarrass me because he's bitter about his life." He stormed inside. Megan followed, shooting me a look that could have curdled milk. Mom came out a minute later. "Connor, why would you do that? Why would you embarrass your brother in front of everyone?" "Because he asked me to look at his watch, Mom. He literally asked for my professional opinion. He was being nice. He was including you, and you had to tear him down." Lily appeared at my side. She didn't say anything, just stood there, which was exactly what I needed. I let it go for the rest of the day. Derek avoided me. Megan aggressively posted Instagram stories about supporting your partner and people who can't handle other success. Mom kept giving me these disappointed looks across rooms. That evening, after most people had gone to bed, I sat down at the kitchen table with a box I brought from home. Lily had suggested I bring some of Dad's old paperwork to show Uncle Ray. Insurance documents, some letters, his workshop inventory logs. At the time, I thought it was just a nice idea. Now, it felt like something more. I opened the box and started going through the papers. Dad had been meticulous about records. Every watch he bought, he documented. Day of purchase, seller, price paid, condition notes, serial numbers. I found a leather notebook, the one I'd photographed pages of on my phone, but holding it in my hands, I realized there were pages I hadn't captured. Toward the back, Dad had made notes about specific pieces, acquisition stories, why they mattered to him. One entry stopped me cold. It was about a watch he'd bought in 1987 at an estate sale in Vermont, a Rolex Daytona, reference 6263. He'd paid $1,800 for it, which was a lot of money for him back then. His note said, "Seller didn't know what they had. Paul Newman dial. Keeping this one forever." A Paul Newman Daytona. For anyone who doesn't know, and I'm guessing most of you don't, a vintage Rolex Daytona with a Paul Newman dial is one of the most valuable watches in existence. Depending on the reference, condition, and provenance, they can sell for anywhere from $200,000 to several $1 million. Paul Newman himself wore one, and it sold at auction for over $17 million. That's the extreme end, but even a modest example in decent condition is worth a small fortune. My dad had one, and I'd never seen it. I went through every page. There was listed on inventory, reference 6263, serial number documented, but I'd never seen this watch in person because Derek had taken possession of the entire collection before I'd had the chance to go through it individually. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos of the inventory list. 14 watches total. The Daytona, the 1967 Omega Seamaster, a Tudor, 2 vintage Seikos, several others. Then I did something I should have done 3 years ago. I texted Derek. Hey, quick question. Dad's watch collection. You said it's in a safe deposit box. Which bank? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, why? Uncle Ray was asking. Just want to make sure everything's stored properly. Humidity control matters for vintage pieces. A long pause. Then, everything's fine. I've got it handled. We can talk about it later. Later. Always later. I put the phone down and looked at Lily, who'd been reading quietly across the table. Something's wrong. I said, I know, she said. I think he sold them. Lily closed her book. All of them. I don't know, but the way he deflects every time I bring it up, the way he got weird with Uncle Ray. And now he's walking around with a fake Rolex, pretending to be wealthy, while supposedly sitting on a collection that includes a watch worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I sat back in my chair and stared at my dad's handwriting, his careful carpenter's script listing every piece he'd spent decades collecting. If he sold a Paul Newman Daytona for pocket change because he didn't know what it was, I said quietly, I'm going to lose my mind. Lily reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Then let's find out. She was right. No more waiting. No more later. It was time to find out exactly what my brother did with our father's legacy. We drove home Sunday afternoon. I barely said goodbye to Derek, which wasn't hard because he was barely saying anything to me either. Mom hugged me at the door and whispered, I wish you two could just get along. Like I was the problem, like I'd been the one strutting around the house for 2 days, mocking everyone. On the drive home, I made a plan. Lily helped. She's a paralegal, which turned out to be incredibly convenient. Step 1. Figure out if Derek actually sold the watches, and if so, to whom. Dad lived in a town of about 40,000 people. There are only so many places you can sell a collection of 14 watches. You're either going to a local dealer, a pawn shop, or an online platform. Derek's not tech-savvy enough for the online route, and he wouldn't be caught dead in a pawn shop. That left dealers. Monday morning, I started calling. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew the collection well enough to describe it. On my 3rd call, I got a hit. A dealer named Frank Petroian, about 45 minutes from my dad's old house, ran a shop called Crown City Watch Exchange. I told him I was looking into a collection of vintage watches that might have been sold him about 3 years ago, and I described a few of the key pieces. There was a pause on the line. Then Frank said, Your Jean's other son? My stomach clenched. Yeah, I'm Connor. Your brother came in about 2.5 years ago, brought in a box of watches. Said they were his father's, and he had full authority to sell. I bought the collection. All 14 pieces. 12. He kept 2. The Seikos, I think, said they were sentimental. Derek kept the 2 least valuable watches. Sentimental, right? How much did you pay him? I asked. Total, $14,500. I had to sit down. $14,500 for a collection that included a 1967 Omega Seamaster worth at least $8,000 on its own, a Tudor Black Bay, several other vintage pieces in excellent condition, and a Paul Newman Daytona that was worth more than Derek's house. Frank, I said carefully, do you still have the watches? Most of them. I sold a couple of the smaller pieces. But the big ones? Yeah, including that Daytona. You know what it is? Frank laughed softly. Son, I knew what it was the second I opened the box. Your brother had no idea. He told me it was some old Rolex and asked if I could give him a good price because he needed the cash fast. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter. Disappointment, so deep it almost felt physical. I need to come see you, I said, and I need to bring some paperwork. I figured you'd call eventually, Frank said. Come whenever you want. I drove out there that Wednesday. Frank's shop was small, well kept, the kind of place where serious collectors go. He was a solid guy, maybe 60, with reading glasses on a chain around his neck and hands that moved carefully around expensive things. We understood each other immediately. He showed me the transaction records. Derek had signed everything. Date of sale, itemized list, agreed price, all documented. Frank ran a legitimate operation and kept meticulous records, which was in a matter a lot later. Then Frank brought out the watches. Seeing my dad's collection laid out on Frank's velvet display cloth was something I wasn't prepared for. The Omega Seamaster with its patina dial, the Tudor with a tiny scratch on the case back where Dad had dropped it on his workbench in 1994. He'd told me that story twice. A beautiful, long dress watch from the early 70s. And the Daytona. I picked it up. Reference 6263. Exotic Paul Newman dial. Cream with black subdials and the distinctive red Daytona text. I turned it over. There, on the case back, scratched faintly with what was probably a nail, the initials J.M. Gene Mitchell. My dad's mark. I held my father's watch in my hands, and I just breathed for a minute. What's it worth? I asked, even though I already knew the range. In this condition, with documented provenance, a conservative estimate will be north of $350,000. At the right auction, possibly more. My brother sold this for a fraction of $14,500 because he needed fast cash, probably to pay for that kitchen renovation Megan wouldn't shut up about, or the BMW lease, or the fake Rolex. Here's the thing that people need to understand. This wasn't just about money. These watches were our father's legacy. He spent 35 years building that collection. Every piece had a story. He left them to both of us, equally, and Derek walked into a shop and sold nearly all of them without telling me, without asking me, and without having any legal right to sell my half. I called Lily from Frank's parking lot. She'd already been doing research. You need a lawyer, she said. This is conversion of property. He sold assets that were jointly owned without your consent. You have a claim. I found an attorney named Sandra Chun the following week. She was direct, no nonsense, and her eyes got very sharp when I showed her the will, the inventory, the transaction records from Frank, and appraisal values. Your brother disposed of jointly inherited property without authorization, she said. The will is clear, equal ownership. He had no right to sell your share. We can pursue recovery of the remaining pieces, and he owes you fair market value for anything that's already been sold. What about the pieces Frank still has? Frank's a good faith buyer. He purchased in good faith, but your ownership claim predates the sale. This gets resolved either through negotiation or through court. Either way, you're in a strong position. I asked Sandra to send a formal letter. Not yet. I wanted to do one more thing first. I went back to Frank and had every remaining watch professionally appraised by an independent third party. Not my shop. I didn't want any conflict of interest. I use a certified appraiser out of Boston who handles estate valuations. Total appraised value of the watches Frank still held, just over $410,000. The Daytona alone accounted for $360,000 of that. The two pieces Frank had already sold, a Hamilton and a Bulova, were worth about $2,200 combined. Not huge, but still mine. Meanwhile, Derek had no idea any of this was happening. He was still posting on social media. Photos of restaurant meals, the BMW, a new designer jacket, and every few days a wrist shot his fake Rolex with captions like, "Grind now, shine later," and "You can't fake success." I couldn't make that up if I tried. The family group chat was business, as usual. Mom posted a recipe. My cousins shared baby photos. Derek dropped in occasionally to brag about something. Nobody brought up the reunion incident. It was like it never happened. Thanksgiving was coming up in 6 weeks. My mom had already started planning. She texted both Derek and me separately to please behave this year, which again positioned us as equally responsible for conflict, as if I had done anything besides answer a question honestly. I told Sandra I wanted to wait until Thanksgiving. She raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Your case doesn't change with timing, she said. Just make sure you don't discuss it with your brother before we're ready. I wasn't going to discuss anything with Derek. Not yet. Let him enjoy the next few weeks. Let him plan his Thanksgiving entrance. Let him polish his fake Rolex and practice his stories about how well he's doing. Because the last time Derek asked me to evaluate a watch, he didn't like my answer. He was really not going to like the next conversation. Thanksgiving at my mom's house. Every year, same routine. Turkey at 3, football on the TV. Nobody's really watching. Derek telling everyone how great his year was. The only variable was which accomplishment he'd lead with. This year, it was the watch. Lily and I arrived around noon. She squeezed my hand in the driveway. You okay? Yeah. And I was. That was the strange part. I'd spent 6 weeks preparing for this day, and I felt calm. Not vengeful, not excited. Just ready. Derek and Megan were already there. He was wearing a new blazer over a black turtleneck, which is a look that only works if you're Steve Jobs and you're already dead. The Rolex, the fake one, was prominently displayed. Megan had a new handbag she kept positioning on surfaces where people would notice it. Connor, hey man. Derek came at me with the big brother hug. Full reset. No mention of the reunion. No acknowledgement of the watch confrontation. In Derek's version of reality, that conversation had simply never happened. Listen, I'm sorry about last time. I think we both got a little heated. Water under the bridge, right? He slapped my shoulder. Sure, I said. Good. That's what family's about. He grinned. The golden brother, magnanimous in victory. Uncle Ray was sitting in the living room with a glass of bourbon. He caught my eye when I walked in and gave me the slightest nod. I'd told him everything. Not the legal details, just that I'd found out what happened to Dad's watches and that I was handling it. Ray had gotten quiet on the phone when I told him. Then he'd said, Your father would be proud of how you're dealing with this. That meant more to me than he probably knew. Dinner was fine. Turkey was good. Mom's stuffing recipe was the same one she's made for 30 years. There's comfort in that. For about an hour, it almost felt like a normal family holiday. Then Derek started talking. It began innocently enough. Someone, I think it was my cousin Nicole, asked if anyone was doing Black Friday shopping. Derek launched into a monologue about how he doesn't do Black Friday because he only buys quality pieces at full price. This transitioned, as these things always do with Derek, into a discussion of his various luxury purchases. You know what the best investment I ever made was? Derek leaned back in his chair. He had that look, the one where he's about to say something he thinks is profound. Dad's watch collection. I set my fork down. Seriously, Derek continued, looking around the table. When Dad passed, he left his watches to me and Connor. I took the initiative to get them properly stored and managed. These things appreciate like crazy. I've been sitting on them, letting the value grow, and honestly, they're going to be worth a fortune someday. Mom beamed. Your father would have loved that. He was so proud of that collection. He really was, Derek said, and I'm making sure it's taken care of for both of us. He gestured at me with his wine glass. Generous, inclusive, the beautiful older brother, safeguarding the family legacy. Megan jumped in. Derek is so good with investments. He has such an eye for value. She touched his arm. The watch caught the light from the chandelier. I looked at Uncle Ray. He was studying his bourbon. That's really great, Derek. Nicole said, Do you know what the collection's worth now? Derek waved his hand vaguely. Hard to say exactly. The market fluctuates, but we're talking significant value. Some of those pieces are getting rarer every year. Have you had them appraised? I asked. The table got just a little quieter. Derek looked at me, trying to read the question, trying to decide if it was innocent. I've done my research, he said carefully. I know the general range. Sure, but professional appraisal would give you exact numbers. You know, for insurance purposes, if nothing else. I've got it covered, Connor. I'm sure you do. I was just curious because I actually had a conversation with a dealer recently. Guy named Frank Petroian. Runs a shop called Crown City Watch Exchange. I said it like small talk, like I was mentioning the weather or a restaurant recommendation. But I watched Derek's face, and I saw the exact moment the name landed. His expression didn't change. He was too practiced for that. But his eyes did something. A flicker. The tiniest contraction. Like a computer running an error check. Don't think I know him, Derek said. Really? He knows you. Said you came into his shop about 2.5 years ago. Brought in a box of watches. 12 pieces. Sold the whole lot for $14,500. The table was silent now. The kind of silence that has weight to it. I don't know what you're talking about, Derek said. His voice was steady. But his hand had moved to his lap, away from the table, away from the watch. He has the transaction records, Derek. Your signature, itemized list, date of sale, all of it. Mom was looking between us. What is he talking about, Derek? He's confused. He's mixing something up. Derek reached for his wine glass, took a drink, put it down, picked it up again. Am I? Because I've also been through Dad's inventory notebook. Every watch documented. And I've been to Frank's shop. I've held the pieces. I've seen them. The Omega Seamaster with the patina dial. The Tudor with the scratch on the case back from when Dad dropped it on his workbench. Do you want to keep going? Connor, this isn't the time or the place for. You sold Dad's watches. I said it clearly, not loud, not angry, just a fact delivered in the same tone I'd use when I told him his Rolex was fake. You sold 12 of the 14 watches Dad left to both of us, without telling me, without asking me. You took $14,500, and you never said a word. Megan's face had gone pale. Not the expression of someone hearing this for the first time. The expression of someone who'd hoped it would never come out. That's insane, Derek said. But his voice had lost its salesmanship. The performance was gone. What was left sounded thin. You have no idea what you're talking about. Those watches are in a safe deposit box. Which bank? What? Which bank, Derek? Give me the name of the bank. The branch, the box number. Let's call them right now. It's a holiday, but they'll have a voicemail. We can go first thing tomorrow and open the box together. He stared at me. I thought so, I said. My mom's hand was over her mouth. Uncle Ray set his bourbon down and folded his hands in his lap. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man watching something inevitable finally happen. And that was when Derek made the mistake that was going to cost him everything. Instead of coming clean, instead of apologizing, instead of doing literally anything that a reasonable person would do in that moment, he looked at my mother and said, Mom, Connor's trying to scam me. He's always been jealous of me. He's making this up because he's bitter about his life. My mom looked at me, then at Derek, then back at me. I could see her trying to find a version of reality where her golden boy was telling the truth. I have the paperwork in my car. I said, transaction records, Dad's inventory, and a professional appraisal of every piece. Would you like to see it? I stood up. So did Uncle Ray. Derek didn't move. He just sat there, one hand in his lap, the other resting next to his wine. Glass, the fake Rolex glinting under the chandelier light, like a punchline nobody was laughing at. I went to the car and came back with a manila folder. Lily had organized everything. Transaction records from Frank Petroian on top, then Dad's handwritten inventory, then the independent appraisal from the Boston firm. Everything labeled, tabbed, chronological. I set it on the table next to the cranberry sauce and opened it. This is a receipt Frank kept, I said. 12 watches. Derek's signature. Date of sale, February 14th. Valentine's Day, if you can believe that. About 6 months after Dad passed. Total sale price, $14,500. My mom picked up the receipt. Her hands were shaking slightly. She looked at Derek's signature, his big, looping signature that he'd been doing since he was 15, and she closed her eyes for a second. And this, I said, sliding over the appraisal, is what those watches are actually worth. The total appraised value of the 10 pieces Frank still has is approximately $410,000. The most valuable piece, A 1987 Rolex Daytona with a Paul Newman dial that Dad bought in a estate sale accounts for $360,000 of that. The number hung in the air. Derek finally spoke. There's no way those watches are worth that much. They were old. They were in a box in Dad's closet. Some of them didn't even work. The Daytona works fine, I said. Frank had it serviced. And a watch not running doesn't mean it's not valuable, Derek. A Patek Philippe is still a Patek Philippe. You can't just... I had every right to. You had no right to sell my half. The will says equal ownership. You dispose of jointly held property without consent. My attorney has already reviewed everything. That word, attorney, hit the room differently than the numbers had. Numbers are abstract. Attorney is concrete. Attorney means this is real, and it's not going away. Megan grabbed Derek's arm. Don't say anything else. We need to call our lawyer. What lawyer? Derek snapped at her. We don't have a lawyer. Then we need to get one. With what money, Megan? His voice cracked on it, just for a second, and in that crack, 3 years of carefully constructed lifestyle fell apart. My mom was staring at the papers. Uncle Ray got up, walked around the table, and put his hand on her shoulder. He looked at Derek and said something I'll never forget. Your father worked 50-hour weeks his whole life. He came home with sawdust in his hair and cuts on his hands. And every few months, he'd find a watch he loved, and he'd save up and he'd buy it. That collection was 35 years of a working man's joy, and you sold it for the price of a used Honda. Derek's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I sat back down. Here's what's going to happen. My attorney is sending you a formal letter next week. You have 2 options. Option 1. You cooperate with the legal recovery of the remaining watches from Frank. I get my half of the collection. You get yours. Frank's been reasonable. He's willing to sell back the pieces at the price he paid, which is well below their market value. So, he's actually being generous. For the 2 watches he already sold, you owe me my share of their appraised value, which is about $1,100. And option 2? Derek asked quietly. We go to court. Conversion of jointly owned property. Breach of fiduciary duty. You'll owe me half the appraised value of everything you sold, plus legal fees, plus whatever the judge decides to add for acting in bad faith. Sandra, my attorney, estimates that number would be in the range of $210,000. The color drained from Derek's face. Megan's grip on his arm tightened. Take option 1. Uncle Ray said from across the table. It wasn't a suggestion. My mom finally spoke. Her voice was small. Derek, did you really do this? He didn't answer for a long time. Then he nodded, just once. Why? She whispered. I needed the money, he said. He was looking at the table. I was in over my head. Credit cards, the car payments, the house. I thought the watches were just old stuff in a box. I didn't know they were worth anything real. You didn't ask, I said. You could have asked me. That's literally what I do for a living. But you didn't ask because you didn't want me involved. You wanted the money, and you didn't want to share it. He didn't deny it. Thanksgiving ended early that year. Derek and Megan left without dessert. My mom cried in the kitchen. Lily helped her clean up, while Uncle Ray and I sat on the porch, not talking much, just being there. Here's what happened next. Derek took option 1, his attorney. He finally got one, advised him it was a smart move, and for once in his life, Derek listened to someone else. The legal process took about 3 months. Frank cooperated fully. We recovered 10 of the original 12 watches. Under the settlement, the collection was split equitably, with adjustments of the pieces Derek had already sold. I ended up with 7 watches, including the Daytona and the Omega Seamaster. Derek got 3, including the 2 Seikos he'd kept. He also paid me $1,100 for my share of the 2 sold pieces, plus a portion of my legal fees. The Daytona is in a proper safe now, at a facility that specializes in watch storage. I take it out once a year on my dad's birthday, and I wear it for the day. The rest of the time, it appreciates quietly, which is what Dad would have wanted. The Omega Seamaster, the 1967 one, the one that was my dad's daily wear for years, I restored that one myself. Took it apart in the shop, cleaned every component, Replaced the crystal, regulated the movement. It runs within 2 seconds a day now. I wear it every day. When I look at it, I see my dad's wrist. I see him checking the time on a job site. Sawdust drifting off his sleeve. Derek and I are no contact. That was my choice. Not out of anger, really just clarity. He's my brother, and a part of me will always love him. But I can't trust him. That's not something you get back. My mom and I are in a complicated place. She apologized for always dismissing my career, which I give her credit for. She said she didn't realize how skilled I was until she saw the appraisal documents, and it hit her that her clock fixer's son had just navigated a 6-figure state recovery without raising his voice. We talk on the phone every couple of weeks. It's not where I wanted to be, but it's moving. Uncle Ray and I are closer than ever. He comes to the shop sometimes, and we work on pieces together. Last month, he brought in a 1950s Jaeger LeCoultre Reverso that he'd been keeping in a drawer for decades. We restored it over 3 Saturdays. When it was done and ticking perfectly, he slid it across the workbench to me and said, "For the collection, Lily and I are good. Really good. She never once told me what to do about any of this. She just made sure I had what I needed and let me handle it my way. That's the kind of person she is. As for the Casio, it's still on my workbench. I still grab it sometimes when I don't want to risk a nice watch. $40. Keeps perfect time, and nobody's ever going to try to sell behind my back because it's worth exactly what it looks like. Funny how that works. Someone once told me that the most valuable watch in the world isn't the most expensive one. It's the one someone wore because they loved it. My Dad's Seamaster has a scratch on the case back, a replacement crown, and a dial that's faded unevenly from decades of sunlight. It's not perfect, but it keeps time, and it tells a real story. So, tell me, if you were in my shoes, faced with that kind of betrayal from your own family, what would you have done? Would you have confronted him sooner? Would you have gone straight to the lawyers? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts on this.